forget to hit record.
Nice.
There we go.
You could just sit here, right?
If you want. You don't want the clicker then? You probably don't need it, right?
If I'm sitting here, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's my fat head, so in the way.
Mirroring might make sense here. Actually, where am I? So in the same place, cool. Bear with me, just to set up. Here to look this first page. Oh, see? That's exactly what it is. And then from here, I just. Okay. So, Josh. Oh. So Josh, just what's the time?
I mean, yeah, however long you want, really. I think we've got an hour and a half.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Hi everyone. My name is Victor, Evangelista. Let me hop over to the next slide. So who is this guy? I'm Victor. I'm a self-taught software developer with multiple.
It didn't switch.
It didn't switch. What?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
I'm a self-taught software developer with multiple years of experience. I've been working as a contractor for the last 2 years, traveling the world. And during that time, I somehow, long story short, I got sick while I was in Mexico. I guess I got bit by a mosquito or something. I became completely paralyzed for like the last half year, and I've been recovering since. Now, obviously, I can walk. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I needed a cane, but I'm staying sick. So now, lucky me, I get to apply for full-time roles during the hottest, time of the year, winter, during the biggest boom in tech, right? So it's all panning out perfectly. Now, as far as the code challenge, which we're going to talk about today, it's for a startup. I just this recently actually, and here's a scenario. So, what is going on?
I'm changing with you there.
It like sometimes wants to. I'll verify each time I click it. So, all right. The scenario. The scenario is to create a front end facilitating reservations. So there's 2 kinds of users, providers and clients. So when I say providers, I mean like medical providers. You can think doctors and nurses, and clients would be patients, right? So providers have a schedule where they are available to see clients, and clients want to book a time in advance on that schedule. So providers, they have an ID, they have a schedule. And for example, on Friday the 13th of August, a provider wants to work 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., right? Clients also have an ID, and they want to reserve a 15-minute time slot from a provider's schedule. Reservations expire after 30 minutes, if not confirmed, and the reservations must be made at least 24 hours in advance. They also want to be able to confirm their reservations. Okay, so the task. Build the front end for a mobile web app that covers as many of the following as possible in the time allotted. So, allows providers to submit times they'd like to work on the schedule, allows clients to list available slots, those time slots, allows clients to reserve an available slot, and allows clients to confirm their reservations. So they said, while you may use whichever tool set you think is reasonable, it should include React. Okay, assumptions and limitations. By the way, you have 2 hours. So I had 2 hours to do this. Assume the API is being worked on in parallel. For the time being, you could create a mock API or just use hard-coded data from a file. Limit development time to 2 hours. Working with limited resources is a key component of the challenge. Let's see if I switch. Okay. And finally, their evaluation criteria. So this will be evaluated similar to a real-world submission. Does the code solve the business problem? What trade-offs were made? And how wise were they? How clean and well-structured is the code? What extra factors are there that show exceptional talent? So, cool, switched. In reality, most of the time that I spent on this was just thinking and planning. So I decided to type in here, 9% of programming is thinking, 10% is typing. So I had a couple of days to sort of think about how I was going to approach it and then actually go in and code for the 2 hours. So just as a disclaimer, I didn't get the challenge and then right away start tackling it. I had time to sort of think about it while I was busy doing other things. So in the back of my mind, I had the ability to think it over. So I considered the tech stack of that particular startup. They use GraphQL for their API via something called Hasura, and React.js as a UI library. So I considered the trade-offs of actually completing all the requirements within 2 hours. So all of these requirements, when I look at it, I think to myself, yeah, this is going to take a little bit more than 2 hours. Am I going to prioritize actually completing everything in 2 hours, or am I going to complete what I think is relevant or the most important in 2 hours so that everything can be made as well as possible afterwards? So I chose the latter. I chose to focus on, let's say, the groundwork. So again, also consider the data and model requirements. Okay, let's jump right into it. So I'm about to open the app and actually show you visually what was accomplished. But just as a disclaimer, I'm cheating. This is what you could see and use visually after 5 hours, not 2. At the 2 hour mark, I had a more limited subset of features that you could actually visually interact with. I can show that as well. My focus though was data modeling, stability, scalability, type checking, based off of all of the factors I explained in the previous slide. So also creating that front end to back end contract. What you're seeing is the result of that initial groundwork. So I'm just gonna hop over here. Oh wow, resolution is fun. Okay, so this is just a quick site that I made for them. Again, this is 5 hours, not 2 hours. And it's just a Tailwind template, so I didn't actually spend all the time making these beautiful effects. So I would say that we'll go through the flow as far as how they laid out the requirements, right? So for for the tasks, we have allowing providers to submit times they'd like to work on the schedule. So let's hop into that, right? So I set it up so that it satisfied the requirements, right? It's mobile, accessible, and you have an ability to actually create an appointment and get started now, which is the same thing. In here, if I hop into the provider sign in, right, I get a list of providers. Now, this is obviously not authenticated. There's no sign up. There's no real sign-in service happening here. If I click this, I'm just going to assume that I am Dr. John Doe or I am Mr. Nicole Walker. I'm not going to verify that just for the sake of getting the feature out, and especially considering the requirements they gave me. So as far as the data goes, this is coming from a mock API, and there's a reason I did that. So as I mentioned before, they're using GraphQL, right? And I didn't want to have to actually, what I wanted to take advantage of there was actually the schema that you get from a GraphQL API. Whenever you build a GraphQL API, you know on the front end what data you're going to get. And I'll actually go over more in depth what benefits that provides for the front end soon. But here is that data. So I just have a list of providers, right? I have, each provider has an ID, and I just added as a bonus, each provider has a name, Dr. John Doe, Claire Feeney, right? Now I click one of these guys, Dr. John Doe, now I can add an availability. Okay, as far as the trade-offs made here, I only made it available for per day, right? So if I select, my calendar, an extra thing I did here is I didn't actually allow you to select a previous day. Obviously, you can't do that. But let's say I want to work March 7th, 2023. I set my start time. I work really early. And I set my end time, right? And I'm working many hours. Ultimately, the cool thing here is, well, as far as the trade-off goes, is that yes, they can submit, the range of times they'd like to work at. And as far as the 15-minute scenario goes of having those appointments generated per 15 minutes, that's assumed automatically. When they submit save, I'll automatically have my 15-minute slots based off of the start time. Now there's, again, another trade-off. There's no lunchtime set here. So if I set this, I will have an availability from time to time. So somebody would probably have to just go and set their lunchtime, right? Let's say something more reasonable. 10 a.m. Let's see. 9 a.m. Yeah, 9 a.m. Right? And let's say they want to go to lunch at 2 for some reason. Then, once they submit, they can go ahead and set the next block of time, right? Again, 2 hours. So, going on, I was able to verify the current time from the server side. I didn't want to trust that from the front end. And then, going forward, I was able to add the availabilities. You're not going to see any feedback here on the front end. Just again, I'm trying to move fast. So here we go. We have just some mock data. This is not what you'd expect. You'd expect to see maybe 30 of these, right? Because for if you're working from 9 a.m. to let's say 5 p.m. or whichever time, you're going to have 4 start times for every hour. So it's going to be a lot, but this is just mock data to get the point across. And we'll move towards the client side.
Can I ask a quick question about that page that we were just on?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, did you, while you were showing them this that you built here, were you explaining some of the edge cases, like the lunchtime thing to them, when you were showing this to them? So
what I did was I recorded a Loom video going over the project, and
and you kind of stuck that in there, because just as somebody who's taken code challenges and also given code challenges, that's one thing I'm looking for in a candidate, is someone who's thought of those little weird edge cases, right? Like taking lunch. You wouldn't think, in the requirements, which by the way, they're asking you to build an entire app.
Yeah, I know.
It's a little crazy. I mean, and most code challenges, they're like, do this code puzzle or something. I hope they use this in production.
I hope that you're gonna see once I go into the actual code how badass it actually is. But anyways.
Hey Victor, another quick edge case. What happens if their start time is after their end time? Do you automatically reverse it?
So I throw an error. Right now that's all I do. I don't handle it much more than that. I just don't allow them to submit it.
And can I cancel somewhere in this interface an existing
So
slot?
like how can I explain this? In the code, I'll just throw I'm not sure if I actually implemented it. Let's test it out live. So put great. Oh no! I have it in the code. I'll show you. It's in there to actually detect that. But I just didn't handle it. So like I know when they give me a time that's earlier, and then I'll do something. But yeah, I did consider that.
By the way, Victor, I was also thinking about a quick workaround when at lunch. If this checks if there is already an appointment during that time slot, block out your lunch as an appointment.
Wait.
Yeah, you probably
You can just set your appointment.
You'll throw off your accounting. There's
Yeah.
generating revenue. So
You're
that's
right. You're making some concerns there. But either way, in a full version of this, I would actually set up ranges. So it would be like a date picker where you could have like a calendar view and actually set like ranges. Like, oh, I want to be working from this time to this time, this and that time, and maybe even schedule. So like on this week, I want to work this time. Stuff like that. Kind of like Calendly. I don't know if any of you use Calendly, but it's a pretty cool app. So that's kind of how I was thinking in the back of my mind.
Come on, you didn't solve all this in 2 hours? What's wrong with you?
I'm so sorry. I didn't build Calendly in 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, okay. As far as the clients go, let's hop in. No, not that. Booking an appointment, right? So at this one, I got lazy for the front end, right? I just said, all right, you guys got the point. I have a list of times here, and there's two things here. So if I hop down to the bottom.
Are those Unix timestamps?
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll see I actually have my timestamps based off of the epoch of Unix based, and I have a provider ID attached to each of these. So as far as how, again, trade-offs go here, from this data, I would expect it at the end to already account for duplicate times. And as far as the who is chosen for a provider, that could be handled in the back end, right? That could be handled like, oh, it's my turn to get a customer, or however, it could be random. But the point is that this would already be nice and set up for me to go ahead and list these out. Then, you click a time slot, and now you have your notification that lets you know, okay, I need to actually book this and submit payment or submit more information, names, email, whatever jurisdiction, and before I can actually confirm. Obviously, I didn't implement that all here, just so that this just gets the point across. Now the backend understands, okay, I have this, and again, this is all mock data, so this would say pending, not confirmed. But here I would actually let the user know, okay, you have X time to finish this. And they could. If they didn't finish it, obviously they get an error, or we could give them a cool experience just based off of knowing some information about them and the fact that they did expire. Earlier in the step, this wasn't required, but you could collect emails and then let them know, hey, are you still interested? However, hit confirm, and here I actually did create a little state. So data, confirm slot, right? This is what happens after you confirm. You now change the status of that booking from pending to confirmed. You have that start time, you have your provider, and from here, of course, this is where you could actually go into, sending them an email, letting them know that they're confirmed, however. But out of the scope. So we'll hit Ryan Reds or go home. And yeah, I also included this cool video, presenting the actual app.
Please tell me they saw this.
Anyways, so again, this is just a quick template UI. There's nothing too special about it, but I got those requirements, right? So we got, build the front end for a mobile app that covers as many of the following as possible: providers, clients, the restrictions on the times, etc. And it did use React. So now we're gonna actually jump into the code. So let's see. Here we go. This slide here. Code review. The text I used, Next.js, which includes React, specifically Next.js 13, TypeScript, Apollo Server, Tailwind CSS, Redux Toolkit, / Redux Toolkit query, which is really awesome. I'll show you in a minute. Date functions libraries, cool little library for a lot of date utilities, and I'm open to feedback, so I'm totally open to anybody jumping in and asking me questions, even while I'm going in. But
because I'm a noob when it comes to some of the front end stuff. I'm a
Sure.
back end developer, so can you kind of walk me through a little bit of because I've heard a lot about Next.js, haven't used it yet. Can you
Okay.
explain a little bit of what I guess is the difference between that and React?
Yep. So as far as Next.js goes, the reason I like it and the reason I use it is not specifically because it's Next.js, but because of what it means. So with React, all it is a UI library that creates UIs, right? That's it. It doesn't handle any more responsibilities like routing, authentication. It's not a framework, right? So it's just this small piece of the puzzle. So Next.js actually takes it a little further and provides the routing, right? Provides a sort of location for you to store APIs as well, like maybe serverless APIs, or just functions that will run. And not only that, but the core tenet of Next.js is the fact that it's server-side rendered. So with React, again, it only runs on the browser by default, which means when you initially jump onto a page, though it's probably imperceivable to the human eye, the app will be blank at first, especially on maybe on a more complex app, you'd see it. It'll be a blank page, and then the React will go in and render the whole app. Whereas with Next.js, you can actually send the equivalent of what the front end will see beforehand, so that they actually can see the app. And the cool thing about the next version of Next.js is with Next.js 13 is that you can go even further, and you can sort of send any components that don't need any type of JavaScript on the front end. You can send those first, and the user will right away be able to interact with those and see those through HTML streaming. So it's pretty cool what they're doing with the next version. And for me, for a dashboard UI, I think that it's there's two ways of thinking about it. That it could be less important, because you can think that's just a dashboard. But I think it is still very important for the client specifically. So for the doctors, maybe I care less. But for the clients, I want them to have the best experience possible. And that's why I chose Next.js. So go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. So did you try to run this in serverful or serverless environments? That's first question. And then what is the code CLI timing, if at all, if you get a chance to run it on serverless, let's say Lambda for instance, or Firebase? So did you do the CLI testing on Next.js? Did you get runtime, uptime, invocation?
So the first thing I'll say to that is, it's a good question. However, as far as my requirements here, I have to say it's irrelevant because this is specifically for mocking. The reason I did all of this was to mock the server. So my actual server will come from the production, right?
Right.
It will come from Hasura. It will come from the backend developers here. But I wanted to. I'll show you why I went through all this, effort in the first place soon. So for the serverless functions, I served a mock GraphQL API there. I didn't particularly care about how long it took, or those types of statistics, just for the sake of getting the type checking. So I'll show you soon. Go ahead.
Are you storing your data in a standardized format like iCal, where you can integrate in with other calendaring apps, or are you using some custom?
No, so I wanted to build this almost from scratch because it's a code challenge. I wanted to, if I just use a library that handles this all for me, or set up that, I know what you're
It's
doing.
a standardized format.
Setting up a standardized format, that actually would have been a good idea. Yeah.
Because I was actually thinking you could probably just scan Google Calendar and have this done in literally all their requirements done in 2 hours, but it's kind of bullshit.
You know what I did?
But it's kind of bullshit, right?
Well, in terms of what I modeled after was Calendly. I had been using Calendly for like the last month, and occasionally I'd hop in and look and see, oh, that's how you do it, it's cool. So when I went through this, I just thought, okay, Calendly, I'll just use that. I didn't think like, okay, I'm going to use this specific date formula, standardized protocol, or however. I will say one thing that sort of maybe was a hindrance to me was I hadn't worked with dates before like this. So if I have more experience in that regard, I would know, okay,
Yeah.
I should use that.
iCal, you should look into iCal. That's how almost all calendars in the world store the calendar format, so you can share it with other companies that are also using the standard format.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. And maybe you could look at when I show the model, then you could let me know if it looks good. Okay.
Yeah, what about the database? What database are you using?
Again, so this is just mainly like a front end challenge. In terms of database, no needed. I'll show you how I mocked everything.
I assume
I think the best way
Just
to
JSON? Everything in JSON back and forth?
so let me show you soon. I'm gonna hop into the code so I can actually answer a lot of these questions before they come up. So let's go into it. All right.
I'm too old to see that.
Are you too old to see that?
It's okay.
What about this?
I'm a lot older than you.
Oh no. Okay. Is anyone having trouble seeing this? You can see this? Okay. So, I came up with a repo for them, right? And I'm sharing my screen. Give me 1 second, okay? Actually, it's fine. I have an idea. Here's README, right? And I believe I can actually preview this. Okay, cool. So I came up with this little README for them to actually build the application, right? So again, Ryan Metz is a full stack Next.js 13 application with full support for statically generated, server-side rendered, recursively streamed, HTML routes, and then only build JavaScript bundles for client-side components. Anyways, then go through these steps to install, run the app, and start it up later, and then hop into maybe a terminal instance. If they don't want to use Docker, they can simply run the app locally. So that's what I'm going to do.
What kind of Docker image are you basing from?
Yeah, it's a very simple file here. It's literally just Node. Node 18.12, and it's massive, right? This is a massive image. I'm pretty sure it's like almost like a gig.
Wow.
Yeah, no, there's smaller versions though. Like I'm pretty sure that there's a version called like
Alpine.
The Alpine,
Yeah,
so the
yeah.
Alpine's a slim one,
Yeah, but for absolute compatibility purposes and not wanting them to have any errors whatsoever with like a limited subset of Node, I wanted to produce that or eliminate that possibility. So I just included Node itself. Now, in terms of modeling is where I started. And so this will be relevant to you guys. So here. This is, I don't know how many of you have worked with GraphQL before, but this is how you actually set up a GraphQL server, right? And how it's going to actually run.
Oh,
So if you take a look here, it's not for databases, this is just for an API, right? So if you look here, I have many types, right? I have queries, which are, you could think of as your GET requests.
Can you turn off dark mode by any chance? Do you
Turn
ever
off
do-
dark mode?
Yeah, just so the contrast is a little easier to read.
Let's see.
I think it's under preferences. If you
Turn
click on
off
code.
dark mode.
Or
Might
just
be
change
last
the
thing,
theme color or something.
Yeah, it's just been a long time since
And then you
I.
can press Control KT, and it'll take color themes.
Yeah, control KT.
Yeah. Or Command KT, my bad.
Here. Oh, nice. I had it. Shh. Okay. Let's see which of you guys like.
It's like
I
a
just have a million
classic
dark-
white
I
background.
think all the light ones, yeah. Around that.
Let's try the default light.
Is that worse?
It's not better.
We're all used to dark mode.
Yeah, never mind.
Hold on.
Pivot.
I got it. Oh, hold on.
Maybe we just need to zoom in a bit.
How about this? This? Does that help?
That is better.
Kinda? Okay.
You see, we just all need to stand up.
That one's good. Alright, you know what? I'm gonna zoom in. So,
There we go.
alright. Okay, queries. You can think of these as your sort of like GET requests in a REST API. Mutations. Sort of think of it as your post request, as your puts, your deletes, etc. And in these in the schema, I provided a couple different ways that you can fetch data, right? So you have providers, and that gives you medical providers, and we'll go in order. So when you get back a medical provider, I'm saying here that you can get a list, right, of providers. And I'll ignore sort of this pound, but it just basically means this data is required, right? It's not nullable. A medical provider has an ID, and they have a name, and they have available slots, which are just of type slot. And each slot simply has a start time, which is of type date. Now, this doesn't exist by default on the on GraphQL, so I just set up a date myself, and I'll go into how I defined it in a minute. Now, as far as available slots, right? This gives me all of my slots. So my expectation with this, hitting this query would be, give me all the available time already filtered, already set up, so that I can just consume these on the front end very easily. You could go and provide arguments to this, like I've done with some of these other ones, and say maybe, hey, give me a range of times, but here I've just, for the sake of speed, again, 2 hours, I wanted to just get this, spitting it out. And that gives you a type slot with provider. So again, start time as well, but also a provider ID to create that relationship. By the way, does anyone have water?
Yeah, I got one in the car. I'll go grab it real quick.
Okay.
I don't know if you have a cup, I have a bottle.
I don't.
No, I'll go grab. I got a couple in the car.
So, current time gives you the date, right? Gives you the that I told you about before, and I'll explain in a minute. Mutations, thank you so much. Mutations allow you to add availability. So this is where the doctor or the nurse or whoever would come in and say, hey, you know, I want to set up my morning shift, right? So they pass their medical provider ID, they pass the start time and the end time. It's just a range, right? And then in the back end, I'll set those 15-minute increments automatically. And that could be set, of course, that could be customized later, a la Calendly. But begin booking a slot, right? this is for the client side. So the client comes in and says, hey, I want to start booking an appointment. So again, they have the slot for that 15-minute increment, the beginning of it. They have their patient ID. They have the provider ID, and they get back a medical booking, which I have not gone over yet. So down here, medical booking, what does that have? It has an ID, it has a start time, it has a provider ID, patient ID, expires at, and a status, enum. So all these are pretty straightforward. ID, right, for the medical booking. Start time I've explained. These two are provided again to handle that relation. And then expires at is important because it allows us to actually notify the client that, hey, you have 30 minutes or X time to finish this. Status is an enum that can be pending, confirmed, canceled, completed, or expired, right? And I don't handle the majority of these cases, but they're just there for the sake of demonstrating that you can have a ton of different statuses. Now, how do you consume this, right? So this is where, again, as far as just quickly getting out an API, where Next.js came in handy. So all I did was instantiate this little API route here called mock GraphQL, right? And so mock GraphQL will take in this schema. Where are you going? Where are you? Here it is. We'll take this, resolve the schema, right? And build based off of it. So one thing that by the way, how many of you here have worked with TypeScript? A little bit? Okay. How many of you here have worked with JavaScript? It's okay, cool. So the reason why I went through all of this trouble is for this, what I'm about to show you right now. So you'll notice when I started my server, there's like 3 processes running or more. Watching for changes, and down here, compiling the client and server, right? Now, why am I watching for changes? Obviously, I'm in a development environment, so I want to do that, but there's another cool thing I'm doing back here, which is code generation. So I'm generating code for the client and for the server. Just as a disclaimer, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this was a boilerplate that I had prepared in general for Next.js apps and that use GraphQL. So I didn't like code all this in 2 hours. This is from other projects I've worked on. So I reused it. But these are generating the types. So with JavaScript, it's a dynamically typed language, right? And you dynamically, I'm not sure, I might have butchered that, but the point is you don't get the type checking you'd expect in maybe a compiled language like Java. So here I run this little file here. We're starting on the server side, right? API. So what it's doing is getting this schema, right? And it's generating, overriding based off my changes. It's generating a file with types, of course using TypeScript, and giving me resolvers, typed resolvers. So in GraphQL, there's this concept of resolvers that will give you the data you ask for on the server side. And here, this is important as an introspection out of the scope. But the point is here, when you hop into lib API, GraphQL generated, is you have all of these types. And they're not important to look through all of these, but what is important is to note like, hey, that's what I defined on my schema, on my GraphQL schema. I now have this marriage between the GraphQL schema and my actual code that I'm going to write. I can say, oh, this is maybe going to be medical provider or it's going to be null, right? Maybe it takes either something or it's null. And resolvers, if I were to write resolvers and go through and create like WebSocket subscriptions, etc., I would be able to create all of these already type checked and understanding what I can do and what I can't do. So, but this is really important for just, of course the server side, but also the client side. So I'll test this live. So I'm gonna try to request bananas, right? And you'll see, hey, bananas does not exist on the resolvers. I can only actually set things that I've set up in the schema. So this is good for the server side, and we'll go through this as quick as possible. Adding mocks, right? I created an Apollo server, but it's all mocked data. I don't actually handle this beyond a couple different things. So for example, like confirming a slot, I set up some default data with a faker library to actually create these. And for the queries, I have providers, a list of fake providers, and available slots, a list of fake available slots, which I defined up here. And then you'll notice everything is type checked, and that was my main goal here. Like, I know that I have to give out slots with providers for the fake available slots, and then for the creating a random provider, I know that I'm going to return a medical provider. So all this is pretty cool for that. Generating slots from a time to a time, and again, this you may notice I'm just blasting everything here, but the point is this is a mocked API. This wouldn't be used in production in any way. This is just for me to like get the data I need from the front end and actually handle it as I would in production. So that way I'm not just relying on a JSON file that ultimately later on I'm going to have to go create services for anyway. So anyways, I get these slots and I have my date type, right? So all I'm doing here is just making sure that I claim my data. It's a an epoch time, and that way I don't have any mix-ups in the data types there. So that's all the mock data. I'm gonna stop going through that. Now for the client side.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
How much farther would you need to go to actually like productionize that? Because it seems like you're real close.
Well, the cool thing is with
You just need a database pretty much.
well, with this mock GraphQL guy, I would still need to create all the resolvers.
Well, but presumably they already have the resolvers because they have an existing back end. So
Well-
I think your question is, how much work is it if you take your existing front end and modify to simply tap into their existing back end? I think
It's a one-line code change.
Right.
I'll show you one time.
Okay.
That's the point I made with going with this approach. My goal was telling them, hey, I didn't finish all 5,000 of your requirements, but I created something so that you could easily go and do those things. And not only that, but based off of your tech stack, here's the things that are possible. So anyways, let's see. What makes that possible though is the code generation for the front end, because I just showed you the server side code generation. This is cool, but it's sort of irrelevant because they use Hasura, which if you know what Hasura is, it just takes a database and it gives you an automatically generated GraphQL endpoint, right? With types and mutations and posts and whatever. But you can also create custom resolvers on top of it. Now for the front end, let's hop in. I have my services. That's where we're going to start. Moving on from the server side, I do this again, right? And I'm actually going to focus on the front end services. So again, overwrite, make sure to set up watching, etc. And I also have another generated TypeScript file. So if you look here, services GraphQL generated, it looks very similar to the server side export, except I don't have resolvers. I don't have any type of extra data I wouldn't need on the front end. And then as far as the next step is I set up generated files, generated services for the front end to consume. So if you come here, you'll see that I have, well, first I just do some operations and I base it off of this generated file, and then I go ahead and run this plugin, which takes the a base API I've created, and it exports hooks. So how many people here have used React? Okay, so a couple people have used React. In React, there's this concept of hooks to actually go beyond just outputting regular HTML, let's say, or components, and actually being able to do things like side effects. So when I export hooks, I get these side effects generated automatically, so that it's very, very easy to consume on the front end. Anyways, let's see what it outputs. So one of these would get providers, right? Here's an example of a query. So all I do is in my services GraphQL folder, I set, okay, hey, I want to get providers. Give me a list of providers with ID and name, right? And if I put, again, bananas here, I'm going to get an error because it's validated, right? I can't. Then I get my generated code as I type it, right? I actually get this code that says, okay, hey, you have this base API that you created with Redux Toolkit, and I'm going to inject my services, my generated services, into your endpoints. So here is where that's done, right? I take the API, the generated code takes the API and builds a query based off of this potential query. So now I can actually, on the front end, consume these. So let's see what this is used, for example, like use get providers query. I don't know the keybind for that, so I'm just gonna search it. Here, like medical providers list. This is a list of medical providers, right? And you can see here that I can just call my service seemingly directly, except it's not. I'm actually getting a lot of cool helper functions and abilities when I do this. So when I call this, I'm actually getting all of my loading states, error states, stuff like that already provided to me, and I can just focus on building the front end, and it's stable, right? So I'm already protected on errors, I'm already protected on this and that, and I can handle them accordingly. I'm already protected on loading states. I get in this loading state, so I can let them know, hey, you're loading your providers. And then here I just go ahead and give you the list of providers. So 2 hours, right? That was my main focus on handling this side. And in the 2 hours mark, I didn't get all this done. The only thing I got done, did I stop running? Was this, right? But I did have all the types generated. I had all the services generated, and I had prepared like the components that would take in those services and render those things. So 5 hours later is when I actually, was able to implement all of this. This I actually was just about to finish right before the 2 hour mark. It's just that I didn't have the date function sanitized to Unix time, and I just didn't include it. But I think that's, unless you guys have more questions, I could go way deeper into this. And I feel like I've been talking for a while. Unless you guys have more questions, I could wrap it up here. I think I've got to the main point of the solution here. So, thank you.
So you got the job, right?
Well, I have an interview. A little follow-up interview.
Oh, really?
You got to great,
So
right?
the first step wasn't a challenge then?
No.
Oh.
This just, how it goes.
So it's interview, code challenge, then more
I mean,
interviews?
more interviews. It's just interview after interview.
Jeez.
Which, dude, I was a little rusty on interviews, so there was one job, for example, I prepare for each interview at a specific company. So for these guys, I like prepared, right, for their tech stack. But for a different, completely different company, I prepared for theirs. I was so confident on the tech side, and they told me, "Oh, we have your final interview coming up. It's going to be tech. You're gonna be screened by a bunch of tech software engineers." And I sit down, right, and I join the interview. I start talking a little bit of tech, and they say, "Actually, nobody here is technical." Like, "Oh, we're all just in HR." And I said, "Okay." So cue an hour and a half of behavioral questions, surprise behavioral questions that I wasn't prepared for. Tell me, a time that you got in trouble with a manager, and how you overcame that. Like, dude, I wasn't prepped. So like, I on the spot, I was doing well for like the first 30 minutes, and then fell apart like the latter hour.
Really?
Just because they kept asking, I'd say like maybe 85% of questions were like negative, right? So tell me a time that you argued with a coworker. Tell me a time that you messed up, like you broke production. Tell me a time that you this, and I'm like, I'm like, dude, I sound like the worst a candidate ever. Like, and then one question was like, tell me a time a manager gave you good feedback. So it was tough, and of course, again, if I prepared for that, I've been ready to, talk my way out of that one really easily. But my focus was tech. I was like ready. I'm like, okay, I know what you guys are using. I've used it before. Here we go. And no technicians. So
Wow.
it's okay. It's okay.
Well, that's a good sign. You didn't even. I mean, honestly, if the company tells you it's a technical interview and it's not, they don't even know what's going on in there. You probably don't want to work it on their tech stack.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it was a cool company. It looked cool. Anyways, yeah. Any more questions in regards to any of this? Or we're good? All right, guys. Yeah.